everyone, welcome to Try Right. This is Pack 365, myself Srija. Today you are going to learn about the physiology and anatomy of alveoli and lungs. So this is the introduction of the alveoli. So you can clearly see the image of the alveoli. They are looking like a grape-like structures, right? Grape-like structures form together in a sac, nothing but alveolus. So what are alveoli? Where it is located? So after the air passes through the bronchi and bronchioles, so this finally reaches the alveoli. So these are the smallest and most important parts of the lungs because this is where the actual gas exchange takes place. So what are alveoli? Alveoli, it's a singular form. It is plural form, sorry. Singular form of alveoli is alveolus. So these are the tiny balloon-like air sacs found at every end of the respiratory bronchioles. As I said, these alveoli, these are the cluster of grapes. You can see in the picture, these are the cluster of grapes grouped together to form a alveolar sacs. So each alveolus, this is surrounded by a network of capillaries. You can see over here in the picture the red color and the blue color. These are the blood capillaries. These are the tiny blood vessels. So this is the point, alveoli, this is the point where air ends and where blood vessels begin. So oxygen entering these sacs and carbon dioxide leaves through them like two gases swapping places. So location. What is the location of alveoli? These are located at the ends of respiratory bronchioles. Actually, next to the trachea, we have bronchioles, right? So after the bronchioles, at the end of the bronchioles, at the end of the alveolar ducts, these alveoli are located. So they form the terminal parts of the lungs, where this is the last place where air travels inside. So alveoli, these are the functional units of the lungs, right? Because the actual air exchange happens here. So what is the one purpose of alveoli? To exchange oxygen in and carbon dioxide out within the place. So oxygen from inhaled air passes into the blood while carbon dioxide from the blood passes into the alveoli, right? So you can think of alveoli is the exchange counters of the lungs. So this is where the oxygen and carbon dioxide take places. So number and surface area. So how many numbers are alveoli present in the human body or in the lungs? So there are about 300 to 600 million alveoli in both lungs combined. So even though each one is tiny together, they form a 70 square meters. Each one is tiny, but together they create a huge surface area. Okay, you got my point? About what? About how much? About 70 square meters, which is almost the size of a tennis court. You know the size of a tennis court, right? Yes. A group of alveolus reassembles the size of a tennis court. So this large area, it ensures the efficient gas exchange where more oxygen can enter the blood and carbon dioxide can leave the blood. As I said, so these are located at every end of the respiratory tree. So which means they are the last part where air finally reaches before the gas exchange happens. So where alveoli are found? These are found in the clusters. So alveoli are not the singular structure, right? You can clearly see they are the grouped structures. They are grouped in clusters, just like a bunch of grapes. So this arrangement, this cluster arrangement, this grape-like structure arrangement, this creates a surface area for the gas exchange. So just like grapes, they share the same stem. Alveoli share a common air passage, that's the alveolar duct or sac. So structure of alveoli. What is the structure of alveoli? Now that we know where are the alveoli are located, let's understand how they are built actually. How they are built and why their structure is perfect for gas exchange. Why gas exchange only takes place in alveoli? There must be a specific reason, right? It's an inbuilt reason, right? If there is no such specific reason, then gases exchange takes place in another places too, right? If this is not happened, So why only gas exchange takes place in only alveolus? Let's talk about it. So what is the basic shape and composition of alveolus? It's a thin walled cup shaped air sac. So what it is made up of? It's made up of simple squamous epithelium. Nothing but the wall is made up of a thin and flat cells. So this thickness, as it is thin, right? So this thinness, this helps gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide pass through easily across it. So arrangement, coming to the arrangement, they are arranged in clusters just like a bunch of grapes. So these clusters are surrounded by elastic fibers and capillaries. So what are the elastic fibers? Nothing but these elastic fibers, this help, actually they help the alveoli to stretch during the inhalation, means during intake of the oxygen into the body, and also this helps in recoil during exhalation, means during taking out of the carbon dioxide from the body, this helps to recoil. So these clusters are surrounded by the elastic fibers. They're also surrounded by the capillaries because these capillaries, they have the capability to bring the blood close to the air. So blood must be too close to the air, right? That's how the gas exchange takes place. So when you breathe in, the alveoli expand like balloons. You know how you breathe in, how the gases, I mean how the balloons expand when you breathe in. So and when you breathe out, they deflate back, right? So this is the exact movement happens with the alveoli within the lungs. So alveolar wall. The wall of each alveolus is also called as respiratory membrane or alveolar capillary membrane. So why it is called? Because this is where the gases exchange takes place. Alveolar epithelium. What is alveolar epithelium? This is the inner lining, whereas is the side that touches the air. This inner lining, this alveolar epithelium actually, this surrounds, this allows the oxygen and carbon dioxide to pass through easily. You can watch over in the picture the alveolar membrane over here and the respiratory membrane and capillaries. So the violet color form oxygen diffuses into RBCs. Here you can see how the carbon dioxide and oxygen exchanges. So this alveolar epithelium, it allows the oxygen and carbon dioxide to pass through easily. Now, so next coming to capillary endothelium. Here you can see the capillary endothelium. This lines the blood capillaries that run along the alveolus. So blood flows through these capillaries, bringing carbon dioxide and taking oxygen, right? So what next membrane? Fused basement membrane. So a very thin layer between the alveolar epithelium and the capillary wall. So this fused basement membrane, it's a thin layer in between the inner layer alveolar membrane and also the respiratory membrane. In between this you found the fused basement membrane. So this holds it two layers. So these three layers together, they form a very thin barrier which is about less than 0.5 micrometers. So this helps oxygen move quickly into the blood and carbon dioxide move out of the blood. So let's talk about this exchange of gases, the pathway. Here on the diagram, on the right side of the diagram, the air inside the alveolus, the first step is the air inside the alveolus, you are looking right. So the air you inhale contains the oxygen. Here you can see the inhaling oxygen, the red color one, oxygen. The diagram shows the air entering the alveolus. So capillary around the alveolus, you can see here capillary around the alveolus. So the blue vessel, it represents the pulmonary artery here. So bringing the deoxygenated blood. So what is meant by deoxygenated blood? It is impure blood. It must be oxygenated to become pure. So this is high in carbon dioxide from the heart. So this blue vessel, it represents the pulmonary artery bringing deoxygenated blood from the heart. So the red vessel, it represents the pulmonary vein carrying the oxygenated blood back to the heart. So here the gas exchange process takes place. So oxygen moves from alveolus into the blood capillary where it enters the red blood cells. And then carbon dioxide moves from the blood capillary into the alveolus and to be exhaled. So here gas movement happens by diffusion, meaning if gases move from areas of diffusion is nothing but gases move from the areas of higher concentration to the lower concentration. So why it is important for the alveolar wall to be so thin? Because to allow the oxygen and carbon dioxide to pass quickly between the air and blood. So in the next slide, you can see about what type of cells are present in alveoli. So type 1 pneumocytes, nothing but alveolar cells. Type 2 pneumocytes, which is called as septal cells. Alveolar macrophages called as dust cells, and endothelial cells. So type 1 cells, these are the simple squamous cells. So they form the main structure of the alveolar wall. So they are extremely thin. Here they are extremely thin because this allows the oxygen and carbon dioxide to pass easily, right? So why do you think the cells are so thin? Because to let gases move easily. If cells are so thick, gases doesn't move easily. As these cells are so thin, the gases move easily in and out during the breathing, resulting in inhalation and the exhalation process. So type 2 pneumocytes. So these are cuboidal cells. So they secrete the pulmonary surfactant, a special oily fluid. So this surfactant, it reduces the surface tension inside the alveolus and this prevents the alveolus from collapsing. So alveolus should not be get collapsed, right? If alveolus get collapsed, so there will be a difficulty in exhalation process. So what does this surfactant do? It reduces the surface tension. So these type 2 cells, they can also regenerate and replace the damaged type 1 or type 2 cells. So imagine this surfactant as soap on bubbles, means it keeps them from popping. Similarly, surfactant keeps alveoli from collapsing when you breathe out. Coming to the next cells, alveolar macrophages. So what are they? Called as immune cells. So why they are called as immune cells? Because they form the blood-air barrier. They allow the oxygen to move into the blood and also the carbon dioxide to leave it. So these are called as immune cells. So coming to next one, endothelial cells. So these endothelial cells, this form the inner lining. So this endothelial, the name itself, endo means inside. So these cells form the inner lining of the blood. So coming to the functions of the alveoli. We know that alveoli look like and what cells they are made of. So let's talk about what they actually do. So alveoli are the functional units of the lungs. So this is where the real work of breathing happens, the exchange of gases. So let's go through their major functions one by one. So first one is gas exchange, the primary function. The main job of the alveoli is what? Is to exchange the gases, right? Between the air and the blood. So what gases? Oxygen and carbon dioxide. So it exchanges the oxygen from inhaled air which diffuses across the alveolar wall into the blood capillaries. So carbon dioxide from the blood diffuses into the opposite direction into the alveolar space to be exhaled. Here you can clearly see the arrows show this. It shows the oxygen moving into the red blood cells and carbon dioxide moving into the alveolar cavity. So coming to the second function of the surfactant secretion, the type 2 pneumocytes you have discussed in previous slide. The surfactant secretion in type 2 pneumocytes inside the alveoli, they secrete a chemical called pulmonary surfactant. So what does this do? It reduces surface tension, right? So it reduces the surface tension, and this one, it prevents the alveolus from collapsing to the exhalation. Same like a soap on bubbles. So the third function, air-blood barrier function. The alveolar wall and capillary wall together, they form the respiratory membrane, which acts as a thin air-blood barrier. So the barrier is only 1 cell thick, so that the gases get diffused quickly, right? If it is more thin, the gases take much time to get diffused. So this is 1 cell thick, which allows the gases to diffuse quickly. And coming to the next function, defense mechanism. So what is defense mechanism? This alveolus, it contains alveolar macrophages. You all know that macrophages are a part of the immune system. So what does this macrophages do? They destroy the dust, they destroy the bacteria and all other the particles. So this helps it keep the air spaces sterile and clean. So what might happen if macrophages didn't work properly over here? Infections and inflammation could occur in the lungs, right? So macrophages should work properly so that there will be no infection and inflammation occurring in the lungs. So the fifth function, elastic recoil and ventilation. So these alveoli, these are surrounded by the elastic fibers. So what does this elastic fibers do? They allow to stretch, right? Elastic is nothing but stretching. So they allow to stretch during the inhalation and recoil during the exhalation. So this elastic recoil, it helps push air out of the lungs naturally. So think of alveoli like tiny rubber balloons. So they stretch when you breathe in, right? We have a tiny rubber balloons. When you stretch, breathe in, and when you spring back, when you breathe out. So this is the elastic recoil and ventilation. So coming to the sixth function, maintenance of pH. So the alveoli help to maintain the acid-base balance pH in the body. So when CO2 is exhaled, the blood becomes less acidic. If alveolar gas exchange is impaired, this carbon dioxide accumulates, which is leading to respiratory acidosis. Respiratory acidosis is nothing but a drop in the pH. So you can say that, so every breath you take not only gives oxygen, but also it helps to control your body's chemistry. So this is all about the functions of the alveoli. So next, going into the next part, lungs. So coming to lungs, you all know that lungs are the most important organs in our body. So why? These are the main organs of the respiratory system. So what is their job? Their job is to help us to breathe in oxygen and remove the carbon dioxide. So these are a pair of spongy elastic organs. So where these lungs are found? They are found in the thoracic cavity. So they are protected by a rib cage. You can see clearly in the picture of the lungs over here on the right side. These are the pair of lungs and these are the spongy and elastic organs which are situated in the chest, that is thoracic cavity. So you can see here around the lungs, these lungs are protected by the rib cage and they are separated from the abdominal organs by diaphragm. Below you have a diaphragm next to the abdominal cavity. So what is the main function of these lungs? Nothing but gas exchange. The process of gas exchange takes place within the lungs. So oxygen from the air we breathe passes into the bloodstream and carbon dioxide, it a waste gas. Carbon dioxide is a waste gas, right? So it go out from our body. So it moves from the blood into the lungs to be breathed out. So what is the structure and the function and also the anatomy of the lung? Here you can see trachea, the upper part. You can see bronchi, left primary bronchus and right primary bronchus. You can see the lobes. Right lung, you have 3 lobes, superior, middle and lower, whereas in left lung you have 2 lobes, upper and lower, and notch for the heart and also the alveoli. So we all know that the lungs are the main organs for breathing, right? So now look at the anatomy, where they are located, what shape they have, and how they differ on the right and left sides. So lungs occupy most of the thoracic cavity, right? So but they do not fill the entire space because the middle portion called mediastinum. This is the mediastinum is nothing but it is a combination of the blood vessels called the blood vessels, the trachea, esophagus, thymus gland, and heart. So the lungs rest on the diaphragm. So this diaphragm, this separates the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity. In between, you can form the lungs. So the lung have apex, base. So this is the apex. It's a base and the round top of the lung. So it extends slightly above the clavicle. Whereas base, the lower concave, this is the lower concave, right? Yeah, it is a lower concave surface that rests on the diaphragm. So when you breathe in, the diaphragm moves down. So when you breathe in, diaphragm moves down and the lungs expand above it. So the costal surface, the outer surface of the lung that lies against the ribs. So this is the part that touches your rib cage. So the mediastinal surface. What is the mediastinal surface? It's the inner surface of each lung. So inside the lung, you can find the inner surface, right? So this is the mediastinal surface. It faces the mediastinum, the central part of the chest. This contains helium. You can see over here the blood vessels like structure. These are the helium, which is the entry and exit point of the bronchi, blood vessels, lymphatic sign, nerves. So you can find the differences between the left lung and the right lung. What is the difference? The right lung, right? The right lung, it's a shorter and wider because this liver sits high under the right side. So the left lung is longer and narrower because the heart takes up space on the left side, creating a depression called cardiac notch. So the right lung is a bit fatter, the left one is a bit thinner. So this is about the anatomy of the lungs. So coming to the helium and root of the lung. So what is helium? It's a depression or doorway on the mediastinal surface of each lung. This is the point where important structures enter and leave the lung. So when you think the helium like the main gateway of the lung, so it allows the airways, blood vessels and lymphatics and also the nerves passing through the gate. So it acts as a gateway. It allows all the blood vessels to enter. So it guards like a security. So root of the lung. What do you mean by root of the lung? So this is made up of the structures that passes through the helium and they connect the lung to the mediastinum. So this root of the lung, it includes bronchus, main bronchus, pulmonary artery, pulmonary veins, bronchial arteries and veins, lymph vessels and also the nerves. So main bronchus, it carries the air into and out of the lung. Pulmonary artery, you know this pulmonary artery, it brings the deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs for oxygenation. Whereas the pulmonary vein, this carries the oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the heart. So bronchial arteries and veins, they supply the nutrients and oxygen to the lung tissues to the themselves. Lymph vessels, these help in draining the lymph fluid, right? Lymph vessels are there for helping in draining the lymph fluid. So nerves, what does nerves do? They control the muscles of the airways. So you can remember it as a group of tubes and vessels entering and leaving the lungs. So airways, blood vessels, lymph and nerves. So pleura. So what do you mean by pleura? It's a covering of the lungs. So each lung is covered by a double layer membrane called pleura. So what does this pleura do? It protects the lungs and allows the smooth movement during the breathing. There are two layers of the pleura. One is visual layer, other is peritoneal pleura. So the visual layer, it's an inner layer. It directly covers the surface of the lung. Whereas peritoneal layer, it is an outer layer. It will be outer part of the lung. So this lies inside the thoracic cavity. So between these two layers, you can find the pleural cavity as I showed you in the picture. So between two layers, you can find the pleural cavity filled with a small amount of pleural fluid. So this fluid, it reduces the friction during expanding and contraction of the lungs. So now coming to the functions of the lungs. What is the main function of the lung? The primary function, nothing but gases exchange. So the main job is gases exchange, nothing but taking in oxygen and removing the carbon dioxide. So where does this gases exchange takes place? In alveoli, okay? In alveoli. Yeah. And then ventilation, nothing but breathing. So ventilation is nothing but movement of air in and out of the lungs. So this ventilation, this breathing, it includes both inspiration and expiration. So inspiration is nothing but inhalation, means air moves into the lung. Expiration nothing but exhalation, air moves out of the earth. So this process is controlled by the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles. So the regulation of airflow. The regulation of airflow is nothing but this adjusts how much air enters into the lung and how much air it leaves to the lung. So this smooth muscles in the bronchi and bronchioles, they can constrict actually. They can constrict or relax to control the airflow. For example, during exercise, airways open wider to allow more air in. So surfactant function. Surfactant function is nothing but surfactant is a special fatty substance produced by cells in the alveoli. This reduces the surface tension, preventing the tiny air sacs from collapsing. So this helps lungs expand easily during the breathing. So next function, defense mechanism. Here macrophages, right? So the lung protects the body from the dust, bacteria and also the harmful particles. So this, it consists of like substances like cilia, mucus and immune cells. You all know that the cilia is a tiny hair-like structure that move the mucus out of the lung so that they trap the dust particles or they can protect the lung. So immune cells, these immune cells, they fight against the infections. So when you cough, your lungs are trying to clear away the unwanted particles, right? So that is one of their defense mechanism or defense action. So pH regulation. pH regulation is nothing but by controlling carbon dioxide. In pH regulation function, it controls the carbon dioxide levels. So more carbon dioxide, you will have lower pH. Less carbon dioxide, you have less pH or higher pH. So the faster you breathe, the more carbon dioxide you lose. That's why you feel dizzy if you breathe too fast, right? If you breathe too fast, you feel dizzy so fast. So the next function, sound production. So air passing through the vocal cords in the larynx, it produces the sound. The lungs supply the air pressure needed for talking, laughing or singing. For example, so without your lungs pushing air out, you couldn't speak or sing, right? So whenever you want to speak or sing, you need the lungs pushing the air out. So the last function, filtration of the blood. So these lungs act as filters. They remove small clots or air bubbles from the bloodstream before the blood goes to the other organs. So they also help metabolize some substances in the blood. So this is all about the functions of the lungs. Yeah, that's it all for today's session, guys. In the next session, you will be learning about the anatomy and physiology of diaphragm and also the medical terminology of the respiratory system. Thank you.